Okay, good morning students. If you don't know me, my name is Dr. Jane Menzies. I usually lecture this class with Ruby, however I'm just about to have a baby, so I won't be lecturing this trimester. Thank you. So a part of what I like to do for students and what I think is important for students is to have guest speakers who come along and talk to you. The reason for that is that as much as you like listening to us, whether it's myself, Ruby, or Professor Doran, it's also good for you to listen to what guest speakers, people who've worked in the industry, and what they've got to say about what it's like to work in international business. So I met Rob at the end of last year, and he had just got back from a very long career working in Asia. And I thought Rob would be a great person to come and talk to you about, what it's like to, work in a culturally diverse workplace, work overseas, which obviously relates very well to international business. And also, just to, give you some inspiration about your careers in general, whether that be in the international business sphere. So I did give you a little bit of background, Professor Doran gave you a little bit of background about Rob, which is on the Cloud Deacon. But basically Rob has lived and worked in 10 different countries in Asia, including countries such as China, Indonesia, the Philippines, Vietnam, Hong Kong, Russia as well, Thailand, and most recently Cambodia. So obviously a lot of experience. And he's, got a lot of different experiences, whether it's been in a company called Manulife Asia, and that was for 6 years, and this was basically he established this operation, and this was in Cambodia, and he was responsible for sales, recruitment, training and development of the agency force. He also has worked in life insurance, different life insurance companies, looks like in Vietnam and in Korea, also some other companies in China, etc. And has also worked at Colonial China Life. Okay, so without any further ado, I would like to introduce Rob McPherson to speak to you for the next 40 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jane. Yeah. I'm not having a baby, as some of you might think, but I'm not. Okay, what I want to talk about is not just experience in Asia, but life experience and things that happen in life and how they shape your destiny, and also how you can change some of those things. And really, I believe firmly that everybody has the potential to achieve their dreams and aspirations if they know some simple steps, and we'll go through those simple steps. But I'll talk a little bit about my background, so I hope it won't be boring, and I'm not very good with IT stuff. Do you know the amazing thing? When you're talking in Asia, you've got to stop talking because they've got to translate what you say. So I talk and the translator, and then I'm thinking, what do I say next? And I've got plenty of time to think. And then they say that, and then I say something else. So it's very easy. But when you're here, there's no translation. So you've got to think, what am I going to say next? So it's very easy to do it with translation. So if I get a bit lost, it's because of the last 20 years I've had translation, and now I'm doing it by myself, and I don't even know how to press the clicker properly. But anyway, we'll see how we go. I like this saying. It's all you need is a little pencil and a notepad. Maybe a 25-cent pencil and a $1 notepad, and you can write down some $1 million ideas. I'm sure, well, at the end, as a matter of fact, at the end, I've got some homework for you too. So I hope you like homework, is that right? Doesn't look very interested in homework. Okay, I'll start from the very beginning. These are the countries that I've lived and worked in, but I'll just start from the very, very beginning. I was actually born in England, and my family emigrated to Australia, and we lived in Australia for a few years. And then for whatever reason, I was only young, the family wanted to go back to England. So we went back to England, and my mother was very ill, and unfortunately she passed away. And my father, well, there was 4 children in the family, he sort of wasn't interested in looking after 4 children. So suddenly at the age of 11, I found myself in a children's home. And I can remember really when I was first in there, I was, I think, very sad at the loss of my mother and very angry that we were there and our father really didn't want the responsibility of us. And I saw lots of other children come in, and it was interesting because families would come and visit them, you know, first week, second week, third week, then it would become monthly, then it would become quarterly, and then finally people wouldn't visit them. And the children in the home, and I think I've got a very high EQ, I could see some of the situations, and some of them have had terrible lives, you know. And I was talking to one boy called Charlie one day, and I was feeling very sorry for myself, and he was very happy. And I sort of said to him, well, how did you get in here? And he told me a story that he had his father had a bicycle shop, and him and his brothers had to go out and steal a bicycle every day. If they didn't steal a bicycle, their father would give them a beating. And the father used to warn them that if they got caught by the police, they'd be sent to a children's home where they'd be beaten and treated poorly, so they were terrified. And these boys got caught by the police, and the police sent the welfare people round to their home, and it didn't take much for them to work out that his father and his father's girlfriend weren't capable of looking after children. So he told me that they were put in a van and sent to the children's home just as his father had said. And he said they were absolutely terrified because they knew they were going to be beaten because their father told them that was what was going to happen. So they took them to one of the cottages there and they walked them down the hallway. They tried to escape and they were screaming, and they pulled them into a room. They tore their clothes off them and they knew they were going to get beaten. But they didn't. They pushed them into a shower. He said, we'd never had a shower in our life. He said, it was amazing. He said, it was warm water. And we had soap. And I can remember he said, we came out of that shower smelling like queens. He said, this is fantastic. He said, and then we went to a storeroom and they gave us shoes and underwear. We'd never had underwear before. And we got shirts and we got pyjamas and we got all clothes of our own, kitted out. And at meal times, we sat down to a table and a meal was served to us. And we had dessert as well. And at night time, we had a bed to sleep in. We had our own bed. He said, this is the best place in the world. And we go to school as well. I thought, oh God, I hate this place. And I'm feeling sorry for myself and I think, my God, what he's been through. And I thought then, it doesn't matter where you're coming from, it's how you think about it. And I realised then that something that's very, very important to everybody, attitudes are more important than facts. So it doesn't matter what the facts are, it's how your thinking is that changes the facts. So anyway, I got out of the children's home, left when I was 16, which you did in those days, left school at 16 and got out of the children's home, made my way to London and got a job working in a shipping company doing invoicing and going to customs and getting notes and some various other things that I didn't really understand. And I was earning about £3 a week and I was paying £2 a week for a little room and life was a bit tough. And I was telling Joe before I had a wonderful system for travelling. This is the best system for travelling in London. I'd hail a bus and I'd get on the bus and say, for example, I was here and I wanted to go to Melbourne. I'd get on the bus and as I trundled on my way to Melbourne, finally when the conductor came up in those days, because they used to wind a thing and give you a ticket, I'd say, could I have one to Dandenong, please? And the bus driver said, this bus is not going to Dandenong, it's going to Melbourne. He said, you can get off at the next stop. I said, oh, okay. So I thought, well, that's 8 stops I've done. Then I got the next bus, one to Dandenong, thanks. Oh, this is going to Melbourne, get off. So sometimes I could do it in 2 or 3 stops, and it was free travel. So that was the way I got around London. Anyway, I wanted to go back to Australia. And I went to investigate, and it was something like, I don't know, £220 to go back to Australia. And there's no way I was going to get £220. And I was thinking, how am I going to make this happen? How can this happen? How can I go back to Australia? So I went down to the docks and I looked at the ships and I thought, maybe I can stowaway on one of these ships. Maybe if I get on one at night. But then I thought, well, I don't know where they're going. I could end up anywhere. So one day I'm going down to the customs office and I see a sign. It said, go to Australia for £10. So I thought, what? So I went in to see them and they said, yeah, you can emigrate to Australia for £10. I said, really? They said, yeah, Australia's looking for British immigrants. I said, when can I go? They said, well, fill in the application forms and we'll tell you the next available ship. So I thought, well, that's okay. So I go in and they fill in all the forms. They say, yep, you're okay. All you've got to do is pay the £10. Oh, how am I going to get £10? You know, that was a little bit difficult, but I managed to save, got the £10. They said, right, you're off. So I went on a ship called the Oriana. Now, has everybody seen the film Titanic? You know, on the front of that ship, I think they were on the back or front, I can't remember, when he's got his arms out like that. I actually did that before Titanic film was even made. I looked up at the stars and I saw every single star in the sky. It was unbelievable. And you could see the surf hitting the bow of the ship. And it was unfortunately, there was no girl with me. It was just me. But it was fantastic. Anyway, so I came to Australia, came to Melbourne. Does anybody watch the show The Block? No? That's about renovating a house. Well, I stayed in this guest house called Oslo Guest House, which was a pretty awful place. You know Oslo?
I saw that they're going to renovate.
Yeah, I saw just the other day they're going to renovate it. I stayed there. My very first night there, my prized possession was a little transistor radio about that big, and I left it in the room and I went to have a shower, and when I came back it was gone. I'd only been there 10 minutes. Anyway, I got a job working in a hotel and worked in the hotel, and it was okay, but it was a pretty ordinary hotel. And then I met a girl and she said, look, there's no future working in this hotel. So I went and worked in a 5-star hotel and they made me a assistant function manager, then I became function manager, and then I became trainee manager, and then I became assistant manager, all these things in a few years. And we got married, and we're only married a short time, and she's pregnant. And here I am, 22 years of age with a 19-year-old pregnant wife, and she got sick with the pregnancy and she couldn't work. And I thought, oh my God, because we borrowed some money from the bank to buy a block of land. And I thought, well, what am I going to do? So I had a friend that had a cleaning contract, so I'd start work in the hotel at 8 in the morning, I'd finish about 10 at night, then I'd go cleaning toilets in other hotels, come home about 3 in the morning, and this was just ridiculous, you know. And when I first got married, I took out a life insurance policy because I thought if something happens to me, I haven't got any family that can help my wife, and her family were very old and very poor and lived in the country, and I thought she's going to be in a mess. So I got persuaded, which was a good thing to do, I took out a life insurance policy. And then there's a knock on the door one day, and it's my life insurance salesman, and he said, you haven't paid the premiums on your life insurance policy, it's going to lapse. Why haven't you paid the premiums? And I said, well, I'm working 18 hours a day and I just can't afford it. He said, you're working that hard? He said, you should consider the life insurance business. I said, no, I don't want to sell life insurance. So he said, I'm going to send my manager around to talk to you. So I said, okay, I'll talk to him, but I don't want to do it. Anyway, the manager came round and he spoke about a career, he said, where you can help people to protect the ones they love, you can help people to educate their children, you can help people to plan for their retirement. He said, you can help so many people in so many different ways. And he said, you work for yourself, you get paid on a commission basis. He said, but the more people you help, the more money you get paid. So I thought, that sounds pretty good to me. So incidentally, I looked the other day and I was thinking about the orphanages in England. That's a developed country. Do you know there's 50,000 children in Australia that are in care at the moment? That's 50,000 children whose parents have got a problem. It could be this, it could be that, or whatever it is. And I wonder, of those 50,000 children, how many of those children wouldn't be in care if the parents had planned ahead and had protection? I don't know, because there could be drugs and all sorts of things. Anyway, I started the insurance industry, and it was, everybody understands commission only. If you don't sell, you don't eat. And when you've got a wife with a baby and you owe the bank money, it's a pretty interesting time. So I thought, well, I better learn this business and work as hard as I can. So I worked 7 days a week, about 12 hours a day, and I became very good at what I did. And I earned a lot of money. And the company said, if you sell so much, we'll give you a interest-free loan for your house. So I thought, oh, that's good. So I sold the land I had and I bought a house in Beaumaris, which is a nice suburb in Melbourne, and life was going along well. Then they said, look, would you like to be a manager? I said, oh, not really, I don't think. And they said, okay. So I became an agency manager, and that job was to recruit people, to train people, to help them to maximise their potential and achieve what they want to achieve. Anyway, I did that, and Joe was the admin manager at that stage. This is Joe, so I've known him for many, many years. And I recruited and built a team that was probably the best team in Australia, and that went well. And then they said to me a bit later on, would you like to be a regional manager? And I said, well, what does the regional manager do? And he looks after all the divisional managers. So I said, yeah, okay, I'll do that. So they gave me a job as a regional manager, and we built the best #1 region in Australia as well. So then they said, would you go to New South Wales? I'm going very fast here. So as what? And they said, we want you to go there as a state sales manager. So I said, yes, I'll do that. So I went there as a state sales manager, and I was there, and that was one of the first year ever, I think, that New South Wales had beaten Victoria in production. So after a while in New South Wales, they suddenly asked me, would you go to China? I thought, that's strange, that's not in Australia anyway, is it? So I thought, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. So I went to China, and I tell you, there's lots of Chinese people in China. And this was a joint venture between CMG and China Life. And China Life is a huge organisation. I don't know for those of you that know, but it's a huge organisation. So I worked with China Life for a while, and I could see at the beginning it just wasn't going to work. So I rang the guy I reported to and said, it's not going to work. And they said, we know it's not going to work. And I sort of thought, what's going on here? And what it was the time when the Commonwealth Bank of Australia was about to buy CMG, and they wanted to have offices in as many countries as possible to try and boost the share price. So I think they were just sort of playing games, to tell you the truth. And I said, it's a ridiculous situation. He said, yes, would you like to go to Vietnam? So I said, yes, we'll go to Vietnam. So off to Vietnam. Now, in these positions, when you're travelling and you're an expat, you're going into companies and you're doing startups, and basically you're recruiting people and trying to build a team and replace yourself, so that usually 3, 4, 5 years you've done your job. And if you haven't done your job by then, you're not doing your job, because you need to develop the local people so that they can do whatever's required. Am I going too fast, or is that okay? Okay, all right, good. Okay, so then from Vietnam, this is an interesting thing. The company there was a joint venture with a company called Bao Minh, and so the company's name was Bao Minh CMG, Colonial Mutual. The company was about 5th in the market and struggling a bit. And it became fairly obvious to me very quickly that the #1 most important thing to any Vietnamese people here? Oh, Xin Chào Anh. Oh, we only got one from Vietnam. Okay, it came to me very quickly that it was very, very important for Vietnamese people to make sure their children were well educated, because the culture there, and it's similar in other parts of Asia, is if your children are well educated, they can go to university, they can get a good job, and when they get older, they can look after the money, they can look after mum and dad. So the thinking in England and Australia is a bit different, but the thinking in Asia is more so that way. Now, I think it's changing, because in Asia I've noticed initially that families very much lived together, and it was seen that as the children went out to work, they would then look after the parents. But now, even in countries like Cambodia and definitely Hong Kong and other Asian countries, that is changing. They're changing more so that the young couples of today in Asia want to get out, they want to live by themselves, they want to have their own house, their own family, and they still want to give mum and dad a bit of money if they can afford it. But it's not where years ago, and still in some countries, grandmother, grandfather, mother, father, children all live in one house. So there's a huge, huge change going on, and I think that's very significant because it's going to continue and it's going to mean huge opportunities in business. So from Vietnam, then the Commonwealth Bank. Now, you should study this one day. This would be a great business model to study, all right? And I really mean this. When I was with CMG, they said, right, we're going to sell the company. I said, why would you sell the company? We've gone from number 5 or number 6 in the marketplace. We're now number 3. We're selling more education plans than anybody. We had an agreement with RMIT. For every children's education policy we sold, we'd present them with a certificate with preferential entrance to RMIT in Ho Chi Minh City. And the people would buy a children's education plan, we'd present the certificate, the children would then go with their parents, look at the university's facilities, And RMIT, before we started that, they were wondering how they were going to fill their university. And after 3 or 4 years, they said, look, we're booked up to 2020, or 2021 or whatever it was. This is years ago. And the amazing thing about that, a lot of the agents would say to me, look, can you come out? Because I sold this policy to this couple and they want you to present the certificate to their daughter or to their son or things like this. So I'd go and do it. And one of the memorable ones was we go to this house, a fairly modest dwelling, and come in, and there's a husband and wife there, so shake hands and say hello. And there's this little girl in a pink dress, party dress, with her hair all with ribbons in it. And he said, our daughter, Trung, or whatever her name was, she wants to sing a song for you. So I said, okay. So she sang a song, and the song was, I don't want to be a rich man's wife, I want to be an engineer. And she sang perfectly in English, and she took me into a bedroom, and she said, that's where the certificate's going to go. So her father already put a nail there, and we put the certificate up above a bed. So her education was guaranteed. So there's a lot of emotional things that go on, and you see the families that are doing everything to help their children to be successful and get an education. So anyway, the case history for the Commonwealth Bank. Okay, this is the biggest disaster ever as far as I'm concerned. They decided to sell, the Commonwealth Bank bought CMG. CMG had insurance offices in Hong Kong, Indonesia, Thailand, Philippines, Vietnam, China, a whole business set up, structure. And the first thing the Commonwealth Bank did says, well, we better sell those businesses. Now, Citibank in Singapore paid Manulife paid Citibank $1 billion to have access to their client base to sell life insurance through their banks. And here's Commonwealth Bank of Australia that's got insurance companies throughout Asia, an opportunity for them to bring in their banks and sell their products and become a powerhouse of Asia. But they sold everything, went back to Australia to be king of the midgets. So, absolute crazy. I'm getting off track here. But that's crazy. When you've got an opportunity, you've got to go for it. I'll tell you another little story. We're in Cambodia. We're sitting around the boardroom table, and the CEO says, all right, we've started out in Phnom Penh. We're doing well. Are we going to go into the other cities? Are we going to go into Siem Reap? I go around the table, and the accountants say, oh, no, it's a bit risky there. There's not the population. Finance, no. Everybody, no. And it gets to me, and he said, well, what do you think? I said, you've got to be joking. We came here to build a life insurance company. If you're going to take a defensive attitude like that, you're not going to build anything. You've got to go ahead and do it. So we went into Siem Reap. It was a huge success, and we went into other places. So, about business, it's not just about the bottom line. Sometimes, sure, that's important, but you've got to look at the opportunities. And the opportunities are huge. And there's an example, that Commonwealth Bank, that's crazy. Absolutely crazy. They just threw away a business that people pay billions of dollars for. Where was I? Vietnam, right? Then the Commonwealth Bank, because they own CMG, they said, you've worked there for so many years, we'd like you to come back to Australia and teach financial planners how to sell life insurance. So I came back, and I was back for about a few months, and I thought, this is ridiculous. I don't mind training and working with people, but I'm not going to do that for the rest of my life. So then I got a phone call from Russia, and someone said, we're looking for somebody to start up an insurance company in Moscow. So I said, that sounds like a good idea. And my wife said, oh, no, you're not going again. And I said, yeah, it sounds good. But before I left, I don't know how this works, but I got another phone call from a headhunter in Vietnam, and said, Career Life's starting up in Vietnam, would you be interested in that? And I said, oh, I'm not sure. And he said, well, look, the people are going to be there this week or next week or whatever it was. Can you go and talk to them? So I said, okay, I can, just I can go to Vietnam on my way to Moscow. So anyway, so I went to Vietnam to Moscow, had an interview in Vietnam, started work in Moscow, and for various reasons I knew that it wasn't going to work, because it was Alpha Bank this is another funny thing. Alpha Bank, the biggest bank in Russia, and they wanted to sell life insurance through an agency force. And the obvious thing to me is, if you've got the biggest bank in Russia and you've got the most customers, the first thing you start working on your bank customers. Why would you start building an agency force? And nobody knew how to do it. I can say I did, but they didn't. And they didn't want to do it the way that I wanted to do it. Anyway, I got a call from Vietnam again saying, can you come to Vietnam? So I went back to Vietnam. Then after Vietnam, Manulife was a company that I knew the directors of Manulife, and we'd gone past Manulife in strength of market share. And Manulife said, would you come work with us? So I said, yes, I would. So I went to Hong Kong, first of all, in their head office. It's a good advice for everybody. If you can, stay out of head offices, okay? You know, they sometimes aren't quite exciting enough. So from Hong Kong, I went to Thailand, and I spent a year as a CAO back in Vietnam with the Vietnamese force. Then went to Thailand and Cambodia. And yeah, I missed out on the Philippines and Indonesia, but I was Philippines and Indonesia in between time as well. So it's been an exciting trip, and I've got to go somewhere else soon. I'm not sure where, but we'll find out. Okay. Oh, just talking about the people now. There's an interesting thing about this photo. As you can see, there's only two fat Westerners there. That's me at the bottom and Robert Elliott above me. When the company started in 2012, nearly everybody was an expat, nearly everybody was a Westerner. But when you come into these organisations, as I said before, you're not doing your job unless you're developing people that can take over your role. So the last two remaining was myself and Robert. And just to give you an idea of the structure, and this is basically all life insurance companies are fairly similar to this. You've got legal and compliance, Mr. Siton on the left. Then you've got bank assurance. Mr. Somebody in the middle there, this fella here, he's HR director. Robert was a CAO. That's a guy called Rota Chan, and he's the guy that I mentored. He's now taken over the job that I was doing and doing a very good job. Chief accountant, chief actuary, you've always got actuaries to do the numbers. Operations, digital marketing, another actuary. We've got actuaries and financial people everywhere, and secretary to the CEO and me. So the management structure is sort of fairly, I suppose you'd call fairly normal, and it's a very exciting environment when you do startups because you're developing people to do something and to understand a job. Now, there was no life insurance in Cambodia at all, so people thought it was a completely foreign idea. So to try and explain to people why they should have life insurance, I've never had it, so what do we need it for now? Now, for all these businesses, I hope I'm not going to go too long. All these businesses, there must be a why. Because whatever business you're going to go into in the future, whatever you're going to do, if you're going in there because you just want to make money or have a prestigious job, you won't be successful. But when you go into business because you've got a clear why, because you want to help people to minimise their taxation or whatever, if you're an accountant or if you are a doctor and you want to do some special surgery to help people to live longer, you've got to have a why for what you do. And if you haven't, it just becomes work. If you're just working for money, that's bloody awful. You know, it really is. Like cleaning dishes and working in a fish and chip shop, which I did in London, I didn't really like that much. You know, well, washing dishes at midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, fish and chip shop, you know, after work, it's just not enjoyable work. Now, some people love it. You know, some people might say, there's nothing better than washing dishes. But not me. Okay. Now, this is a great why. I love this why, and this comes from Henry Ford. I will build a motor car for the great multitudes, constructed of the best materials by the best men to be hired after the simplest designs that modern engineering can devise. So low in price that no man making a good salary will be unable to own one, enjoy with his family the blessings of hours of pleasure in God's great open spaces on the Southeastern Freeway on Monday morning. But what a great thing. He wanted to build cars. He wanted to build cars for everybody. So, he didn't just say, I want to build cars and make a lot of money. I want to change the way people live and act. So to me, I think that he had a great why. Now, in Cambodia, this was a simple why, but it was helping Cambodian families to achieve their dreams and aspirations. Now, when we recruited agents, we recruited about 1,000 agents a month, and we terminated about 500 a month. It was a business because it's not the business for everybody, but if somebody was just coming in there to try and make a bit of money, they wouldn't last long at all. But when people came in there and they understood the purpose is to help Cambodian families to achieve their dreams and aspirations, there's a feeling of self-worth and there's a feeling of value. And the company's grown. There's probably about 8,000 agents now. They've got lots of agents qualifying for international standards. There's an organisation called $1 Million Round Table, and we've got lots of agents and managers that have qualified for that. People have come to me and they've said, this company and you and Robert, you've changed our lives. I've been able to buy my family a house. I've been able to buy a car. I never thought I could do this before. I never realised there was such great opportunity. And it's not just the job I do, it's what we've learnt. So it's about exactly that, helping Cambodian families to achieve their dreams and aspirations. And if you do that and you're thinking about those people like that, you find it's amazing. Just a quick story about Cambodia. Robert Elliott, the CEO, very good CEO, he said, we need to be sharp and efficient. We will pay any claim within 5 working days. So we have people killed, the claim's paid within 5 days. If for some reason it's not paid within 5 days, you wouldn't want to be around if Robert was around because it's got to be paid. Now, we also in Cambodia did group life. That means we'd go into companies and we'd say, we'll insure your 20,000 employees, we'll insure the factory workers for 10,000, the senior management for 20 and the directors for 50 or whatever it was. And the premiums this, and the companies would buy that product to protect their employees. Some would, not all. And I can remember one time there was one of our agents who was a friend of some people working with Coca-Cola, and his other friend, 3 of them, and they were in Siem Reap. And one of the young men that worked for Coca-Cola, his wife was just about to go to hospital to have a baby. And he got a phone call saying that the baby's on the way. So the 3 men jumped in the car and off they were on the way to hospital. And the car had an accident, turned over and went into like a creek or a sort of rice paddy. And all 3 of these guys were killed. They're only about 24, 25. And I felt how emotional that was. The wife's in hospital, just given birth, waiting for her husband, and someone's got to tell her she's never going to see her husband again. So anyway, the claim was paid, and I went with the manager because in the province in Cambodia, they not much English, and I went with the manager to deliver the cheque. And we walked down this dirt road off the main road for about 300 yards because you couldn't drive a car down there, it was too rough. And you come to this little wooden house that the average Australian wouldn't even call a good tool shed. And this is where this family lived. And they had a few chickens and a few ducks and a few vegetables growing. And the wife was there with the baby, and we handed over the cheque and the manager explained through translation. And the mother-in-law, or the mother of the daughter who had the baby, she was crying and she said, you don't know what this means to us. This is a gift from our son-in-law, because she said now we can pay all our debts off, we can live debt-free, and we've got lots of money left over to buy the things that we need, and this is fantastic. You know? And I'm sitting thinking, 10,000? It's nothing. But it made a huge difference there. So when you look at that, helping people to achieve their dreams and aspirations, that's very, very important. So whatever business you're in, you've got to have a strong why, a why that gets you up and gets you going to work. Now, a little bit different in CMG, Bao Minh CMG in Vietnam. The culture there was more so, and I know it's hard to say, but it was more, the trouble with the volume. We got volume, all right. Okay, that's amazing, isn't it? The world in 60 seconds, hey, geez. Okay, if I press the right button here. The world is over 4.5 billion years old. Over 4.5, older than your grandmother. And if you look at it, That little dot probably represents, I don't know, 5 million years, 10 million years or whatever. And our life is probably like a little dot, a little bit of sand or something. Now let's grab a lady. This lady will do. Come here. What's your name?
Priyanka.
Who?
Priyanka.
Vrianka.
P.
V.
P.
P. P. Bianca. Okay. Do you realise that in the last 4.5 billion years, there has never been anybody like Priyanka? Never. And there never will be again. Do you know that? You are very special. You are very unique. There's only one ever in 4.5 billion years. What about that? Do you feel special?
Yeah.
You are. We're all very special. There's never been anybody like us ever again, and there never will be. Thanks, Bianca. Good girl. Very special girl. Now, here we are. Just a tiny little bit of sand, a tiny bit of time to live. We're special and we're unique. We've got to do something with our lives. Every year, millions of people die, old age, natural causes, wars, whatever. How many of those people on the deathbed are laying down thinking, I never did climb that mountain. I never did go on that holiday. I never did get that degree. I never achieved this. I never did this. You know, it's not tomorrow I'll do this or the next day I'll do this. You've got to decide we'll talk about that in a minute, what you're going to do, because we get one life, we get one opportunity, we're special people, and we've got to make the most of those talents and abilities we've got to enjoy and live the life that we want and help other people on the journey. Okay. I like this Ralph Waldo Emerson. What lies behind us and what lies before us are tiny matters compared to what lies within us. So we've got everything's there inside us. Okay. Could you climb Mount Everest? No? 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 Okay. What about this then? Over 1,500 people have climbed Mount Everest. A 13-year-old boy's climbed Mount Everest. A 76-year-old man has climbed Mount Everest. A 63-year-old woman has climbed Mount Everest. A man with one leg has climbed Mount Everest. You know, sort of hop and chin and hop and chin. But true, this is what's happened. What about this? A blind man's climbed Mount Everest. Now, he went out to buy a pizza and got lost, but don't tell anybody. So, if those people can climb Mount Everest, if you decided that you wanted to climb Mount Everest, you could too. If you decided. Do you agree? Yeah, right. Let's go to an easier one. Could you sail single-handedly around the world by yourself? Sharks, pirates, maniacs, robbers, storms. Could you do that? Or maybe. Okay, we've got a 16-year-old girl that sailed single-handedly around the world, a 17-year-old boy, a paraplegic, and a 68-year-old woman. So same thing again. If you decided that's what you wanted to do, you could do that because you have the ability. Now here's a hard one. Could you be a movie star? Yep, we've got some movie stars here. Right, let's have a look at this one. Well, we'll go back, sorry. There's a movie star. Right, if he can be a movie star, anybody can be a movie star. Danny DeVito. Now, did you know that Danny DeVito called on, I think, just about every studio and every place in Hollywood trying to get a job, and he was knocked back hundreds of times, and he got a small part, and then it went from there. So he had made the decision he wanted to be a movie star. So the thing is, you can achieve whatever you want if you decide. I'll talk about that in a sec. Have anybody heard of Napoleon Hill? No? Okay. Napoleon Hill says, what the mind of man can conceive and believe it can achieve. So whatever you can think of and believe, you can achieve. Now what happened, it was America hundreds of years ago. Has anybody heard of Andrew Carnegie? Andrew Carnegie? Okay, I'll tell you the story. This guy, Andrew Carnegie, emigrated from Scotland to America. He saw a great opportunity in steel because the railway bridges were made of wood and the buildings that were being built in New York were nearly all wood. He saw the potential of steel. He worked very hard. He learnt a lot. He invested in steel. He went through a fairly hard childhood. And, finally, anyway, long story short, he became a multi-billionaire in America. He was richer than Bill Gates is today back then. He was the richest man in America. So he got together with his mate Henry Ford and the Prime Minister of the day and a few other people. And he said, look, we live in the richest country in the world. He said, why have we got poverty in America? Why have we got people that aren't succeeding? Why have we got people that don't know how to be successful? So they thought about it, and they used to have a few drinks and catch up and have a chat and think about it. And they said, I'll tell you what, Andrew Carnegie said, I'll tell you what, I'm going to commission someone to write a book on the secret of success, and I'm going to give this person introduction to every successful man I know in America, so he can do some research and he can write a book that's factual, that the everyday man and woman can read and understand how to achieve what they want in life. So he spoke to this guy called Napoleon Hill, who was a newspaper reporter or whatever, and said, I want you to write this book. And Napoleon Hill said, I think that's going to be too much for me. And he said, I'm giving you the opportunity of a lifetime and I think you can do it, so you're going to do it. Anyway, Napoleon Hill wrote this book, and it was the first success book that was ever written. And every other success book that you may have read is based upon Napoleon Hill. There's nothing new other than what's in that book. So that's a great book for you to read. Okay. Earl Nightingale. Has everybody heard of Earl Nightingale? Maybe only old people have heard of these people. Earl Nightingale worked in a sales organisation. He was like a sales director or whatever. And one Christmas he decided to write a letter and send it to the wives and to the husbands so that the family got his letter about success. And he wrote this letter, and people said, they came back to him after and said, well, you got your letter. It's beautiful. It's fantastic. It tells me things I never realised. And the key thing in that, he said, success is the progressive realisation of a worthy ideal. And he says, if somebody wants to be a nurse and they work to become a nurse and they achieve it and they achieve that and they're helping people and that's what they want to do, that person's successful. If somebody wants to be something else and they do that, they're successful. But too many people today, you listen to them, they say, I've got to get a job. Well, you're not going to be successful if you've got to get a job. But if you want to be, if you desperately wanted to be a tram conductor, if that was what you really wanted, and you became one, you're successful. Not that we want to be tram conductors, somebody might. Anyway, he also said that, why is this? At age 65 of 100 people, only one will be rich. 4 will be financially independent. The other one is 5% will still be working. 54 will be broken depending on old age pensions or charities of some sort, and 36 will be dead. Now the dead people can't help it because they didn't plan for that. But why would only 1% be rich and only 4% be financially independent? Particularly, those figures are pretty much the same in Australia. Any thoughts on that? Yeah, they didn't plan.
They don't work for money. They don't work for money. They work for innovation and they work for new ideas. They're passionate.
The rich ones, you mean? Yeah. You're right. You're right. You find the really wealthy people aren't necessarily working for money. They're working in something they love to do. They're passionate about it. Yeah. Once you find your passion, it's easy because the rest will come. Because when you go to work, it's not going to work. You're going to have fun. Yeah, spot on. Zig Ziglar. Anyone heard of Zig? You must have heard of Zig Ziglar. I'm going to start crying in a minute. I haven't heard of anybody. Zig Ziglar is an American motivational speaker. He's quite a funny man. He's died, unfortunately, now, but he says only 3% of people have clear written goals and only 1% of all people carry their goals around with them. So, humans are like heat-seeking missiles. If you've got a goal firmly implanted in your mind, you're going to get it. Now, even with little goals, like Saturday night, I'm going to the movies with this girl, nothing's going to stop you. You've decided that's what you're doing. It's a heat-seeking missile. That's what's going to happen. We just don't decide enough or big enough things. Okay. How much longer have we got? Another 10 minutes? Yeah. Okay. There's 3 things you need, and then finally the 4th thing. There's 4 things that'll help you to sort of understand. You probably already do, but anyway, I'll tell you again. An elephant. When an elephant's a little baby elephant, they put a big chain on its leg and put a big stake in the ground so the elephant can't run away. And the elephant pulls and pulls and pulls and tries to get free, and he can't break free, so after a few months he stops trying. So they can take off the big chain, they can put on a little chain, and the elephant will just stand there. He won't try to walk away because he's been conditioned by his circumstances. He's been conditioned to believe that he can't. And that's sometimes what happens to us. We get into a situation where we're conditioned to believe that we can't. So the first thing, I think, is you have to believe in yourself and you have to believe in what you do. Because if you don't believe in yourself, nobody's going to believe in you. Nobody at all. So you have to believe in yourself, and you have to have a passion and that belief that gentleman over there said before. Whoops, wrong way. Wrong way again. Now, you've all heard of the 80-20 rule? It comes in many shapes and circumstances and sizes and so forth. Anyway, 80-20 rule. Basically, if you look in Australia today, there's probably 80% of the people that aren't really happy with their life in some way or another. I'm not happy about the job I have, I'm not happy about the girl I'm married to perhaps, or I'm not happy with the house we live in, or I'm not happy with the car we got, or I'm not happy with my job, I'm not happy, blah, 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 blah. But they do nothing much about it. They go through life complaining. You know? The other 20% realise that if they want to be successful, they have to have the why, they have to have what they want to do, and they have to focus about working on their why and what they want to achieve in life, and they know that the house, the car, whatever, the holidays, all those other things will come. You won't have to worry about those. But you've got to focus on what you're going to do. You've got to be the best at what you've got to do. You've got to have a strong why and a strong purpose in what you do. And you won't have those other problems of, I'm not happy with this, I don't like this, I don't like that. I don't think Bill Gates says, I don't like the house, I don't like this, I don't like that. I think he's very happy with most things because he's giving bucket loads of money away to people. So, okay. Now, has anybody heard the eagle story? No? Okay. I thought you might have. Okay, I'm going to tell you that this is one of my favourite stories, right? I like this. Do you know, first of all, does anybody know anything about chickens? Yeah, some people know, you know about chickens. Do you know if you get a duck egg and put it under a chicken, and the duck hatches out, the little duckling hatches out, the chicken will mother that and treat it as its own. If you put doesn't matter what egg you put under a chicken will nurture it. Its maternal instinct takes over, and the duck, the first thing it sees when it comes out of the chicken. So as far as the duck's concerned, the chicken's its mother. It doesn't know. Anyway, this American Indian goes to the top of a mountain and he sees this eagle's nest, and it's got a big egg in it. So, oh, wow. So he takes the egg and he runs down the mountain to his farm, and there's a chicken there sitting on eggs. So he slips this big eagle's egg under the chicken. Anyway, after a couple of weeks, the little chickens come out, and a week or so later, the eagle comes out of his egg. And the eagle, looking around, and he thinks he's just a big ugly chicken. So he lives on the farm with the chickens, and he's scratching away in the dirt and picking up what he can. The odd rat that comes by, he seems to have a passion for as well, not unlike the chickens. And one day, he looks up in the sky and he sees this magnificent bird. So he says to one of the chickens, "Oi, what's that bird up in the sky?" And the chicken said, "That is the eagle." He said, "That's the king of the birds, the most famous, the most handsome, the bravest, the strongest." And the eagle looks up and says, "Oh, he's so lucky. I wish I could be like him. Oh, if only I could be like him. Oh, so lucky." Anyway, the eagle continues to live on the farm, scratching in the dirt, and he got old and he died. That's the end of the story. So he had the potential, but he never used it. And we all have the potential, and sometimes we never use it too. But that's an obvious one. He didn't use his potential. All he had to do was flap and do a few things and he'd be off. Okay. I keep going the wrong way here. So you need to use your potential and the abilities that you have. It's almost a crime not to use them, because I should imagine everybody in this room has got certain traits, abilities and talents that maybe other people haven't got, and it's important that this short time you've got on this earth that you use those abilities. Oh, I didn't think this was coming. Okay, 10 minutes. Now, you've got a desire. Okay, this guy, we'll tell her, because this is from Thailand, this one, okay, where they have monks. And a lot of people go to the monks if they want some advice or so forth. And believe it or not, the monks do a lot of good work. They take a lot of orphan children in and educate them when families can't look after them and teach them. So they do a lot of good in Thailand and in Cambodia. Now, this guy goes to the monk and he said, look, I'd like to know the secret of success. Can you help me with the secret of success? And the monk says, certainly I can. He said, meet me by the river, 7 o'clock in the morning, and I will teach you the secret of success. He said, oh, thank you very much. So the young man comes down to the river and he gets there, and the monk's already in the river up to the water, up to his chest. And he says, come on in. So the guy strips down to his underwear and in he goes. And he walks up and he's right up next to the monk. And the monk said, right, now I will teach you the secret of success. So he said, thank you. And he grabs hold of it and he pushes him under the water. And he thinks, this guy's mad, he's going to kill me. And he's struggling trying to get free, but the monk's very strong and he's holding him under the water. And he's still struggling and kicking. And finally he manages to break free and he turns around to the monk and says, you're mad, you could have killed me. He said, what were you thinking about when you were down there? He said, I needed air. He said, yes. He said, I know. He said, when the thing that you desire, you need the same as you need air, then you will achieve. Then you'll be successful. You've got to really want that thing. Right? Anyway, that's what he said. Okay. We finish off with this now. Right. Now, if I told you I've got a formula here, which is worth more than $1 million to everybody in this room, and it's guaranteed it cannot fail, it's worth more than $1 million to everybody in this room, guaranteed. Would you remember it, do you think? Okay, all right. Okay, this is now, you might have heard of goal. Everyone's gone through goal setting. You do this, you do that, you do this and all that stuff. None of those things seem to work, but this does. Okay, number one, the first thing you have to do, you have to decide what is it you're going to do. What is it? And you can't just say, well, I'd like to be rich or I'd like to be this. You have to have a clear goal. Very clear, so you can see it in your mind. What is it you want to achieve? Whether you want to be a university lecturer or whether you want to be a business, self-employed business person or whatever. You have to see clearly what you want to do. So you have to make a decision. Number two is you've got a treasure map. Now, by treasure map, whatever this thing is that you want, you have to have a picture on your iPad of you with that thing. You have to have it written next to your bed. You have to have it on the ceiling where you sleep. You have to have it on the back of the toilet door. You have to have it on the mirror where you shave or put on your makeup in the morning, or maybe you do both, I don't know. But you have to have it everywhere. You have to carry it in your wallet. If, for example, it was to own a hotel, maybe you have a picture of a hotel on your phone. So when you log into your phone, up comes hotel, or you have a picture on your iPad. That thing that you want, you have to have everywhere that you can see all the time. You never forget it. Maybe your password, if you want to buy this hotel, your password is hotel for your computer. Every single thing, you've got to put it in front of you. Now, I don't know how this all works, but you can get on the web and you can look up the power of the subconscious mind. There's thousands of articles on it. I'm telling you, it is real. If you consistently think about something and that's the thing that you want, things will happen that will help you to achieve that thing. Okay? Well, so you need to listen to your subconscious mind. You'll wake up in the morning and think, I've got an idea how to get this, or I've got an idea how to achieve this. Next, you've got to make a plan. How are you going to do it? Step by step. Can you eat an elephant? No? Yeah. Everybody can eat an elephant. You have a little bit of elephant for breakfast, a little bit for supper, a little bit for lunch, a little bit for dinner, and in 20 years you've eaten the whole elephant. So when you make a plan, some people make a plan for their lifetime. It might be a plan that's going to take you 50 years to achieve. It might be a plan that's going to take you 5 years or 6 years or whatever. But you must make a plan. Then the next thing, of course, you've got to go to work. So you plan your work, work your plan. And finally, you turn around and say to somebody that you know, I've decided I'm going to buy a hotel. It's going to be worth about $50 million. That's what I've decided I'm going to do. And they'll turn around and look at you and say, are you mad? You're never going to do that. You know nothing about hotels. Where are you going to get the money from? Are you stupid? If you listen to those people are the dream stealers. If you listen to the dream stealers, they will destroy you. And anybody that tells you you can't do things isn't a friend of yours, because your friends will encourage you and enthuse you to do things and achieve great things. People, negative people, will always tell, oh, that's too hard, you can't do that. You can't qualify for that course. You're too stupid. You're too young. You're too old. So beware of the dream stealers. Do you know something? If you think of the 4 or 5 people that you associate with most, if those people are positive, vibrant, exciting, switched on entrepreneurs, you're the same. If those 4 or 5 people you mix with are depressing, negative, so forth, unfortunately you will be the same. In English they say, if you walk with lame men, very soon you start to limp yourself. So you need to make sure you're moving with the people that are like you, intelligent, switched on, hardworking, ambitious people. Okay, so don't listen to the dream stealers, don't listen. And that remedy, do you know why it works? Why it's 100% guaranteed it will work? Okay, who decides what you want? You do. Right. Who can do the treasure map, the pictures everywhere? You do. Who controls your subconscious, or who can listen to your subconscious thinking? You do. Who makes a plan? Everybody now. Who goes to work? Who doesn't listen to the dream stealers? See, you control every step. Every step is controlled by you. You can't turn around and blame anybody else. It's all controlled by you. So it's not your father, it's not your education, it's not where you work, it's not where you go to school, it's not your teacher, it's nothing, it's you. When people realise that you and you alone control your future, then life gets very interesting, because there's no limits. No one places limits on you except you. Okay, so have you got that formula written down? Okay, here's the homework. Okay, that's what teachers normally do, I thought. Okay, so do you want to write the homework down? Read Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. Now, Earl Nightingale on YouTube looks about 80 years old and he's got thick glasses and says, good evening. He looks like a scary movie person or something, but he's got a good message. But you can see that on YouTube. Set your goal by following the DECIDE treasure map, listen to your subconscious, plan work, and no to the dream stealers. Okay, I'll get out of the way so you can take photos of that. That's worth millions of dollars to you. Okay, if I press the clicker, that's me done. Thank you very much.
Okay, so I would just like to kind of contextualise the presentation into this topic of, or into this unit of international business. Rob had some very good comments about how culture might differ between countries. So he's working in the insurance industry, but what people wanted in different countries differed, didn't it? From what happened in Cambodia to what happened in Vietnam. Vietnam very much had that focus on education. And Cambodia was more about protecting life, or supporting life in an event where you lost a family member. So that's interesting when Ruby talks about culture later on in this part of this lecture. You can think about some of these examples in regards to that. Also wanted to kind of bring the general into the specific of international business. And while I was listening to all of this, I was thinking very much about topic 7, which is and sorry, you haven't obviously come across topic 7 yet, is about strategy. and it's about goal setting. It's about what is the business that you are going to do as a part of your assessments. What is the why factor? And Rob very much talked about that. You know, why are you in business? And you can think about that in your organisations that you're doing for your assessment pieces. And you can very much sort of think about like the goal setting process as well. You know, it's about deciding what you need to do, listening to subconscious, planning, working, all of those types of things. So apart from thinking about that for your case organisations that you're going to look at, I guess you can also think about that for your own careers if it was in international business as well. Okay, so I wanted just to kind of contextualise that a little bit. Does anyone have any specific questions for Rob? Rob, are you on LinkedIn?
Yeah.
Yes. So Rob is on LinkedIn.
I check it about every 3 months.
Oh, okay. So that's when you can expect to get a return message. But if you have any specific questions about international business or about culture or even about this motivation thing, you know, I really encourage you to, you know, send message, connect with Rob over LinkedIn and send him a message. Yep, do we have a question?
Talking about Cambodia, there's no healthcare in Cambodia is what I've heard when one of my friends visited Cambodia. So how did you tackle that? Because you are into that business related to healthcare, and I've heard about that he was not well in between and he had to go to Thailand to get a checkup done. So they use same syringes and they didn't have proper healthcare in Cambodia. So how did you tackle that?
Okay, we tackled that because Manulife was life insurance company. We didn't do health insurance. So, but the thing is, you're right about health insurance. There's you have to have private health insurance from other companies that will do it. And the Cambodian people, if they, unfortunately, if they get sick, the family's got to rally around and raise some money for them to go to hospital, or else, because most of them don't have health insurance. And if it's a serious operation, a life and death situation, they have to transport the family member to Thailand, and that costs a lot of money. So it really is the health situation in Cambodia is very poor. The government hospitals are terrible, and the local hospitals, you really wouldn't want to go to them. You know, I can tell you, I had one experience in provinces in Vietnam where I had cause to go to a hospital, and there'd been a bus accident a few hours before. I'm trying to get in the hospital, and there's bodies on trolleys and blood dripping on the floor, and there's people smoking cigarettes dressed in doctors' uniforms, and I'm thinking, oh my God, you know, you wouldn't want to go there for anything, and it's like that in Cambodia. So the wealthier people have private health insurance for going to Thailand and other countries, and the poor people, they put up with the local hospitals and the poor conditions.
Okay, any more questions at all? Oh, good. Okay, so I would like to thank Rob for coming along and speaking to you. I hope that you've got something out of this, whether it's an international business aspect or whether it's a sort of a motivational aspect. So on behalf of all the students, I have a little gift to say thank you to Rob. So thank you very much. Okay, so I will now hand you back to Dr. Ruby Ma. So, and enjoy your class today. Thank you. I'll come down at 12. Oh, okay. Yeah.
Hi. Before we continue and have today's topic delivered in class, would you like to take a 10-minute break? Yeah, you've been sitting down for a long time, so get up and a bit of stretch, for a bit of fresh air, and then we'll resume in 10 minutes' time.
Have you got your clicker?
Okay, everyone, let's try to get back into class. Let's try to get back into class again. Okay. Now, the morning guest speaker with the last bit with the music, the 60 seconds of humankind definitely woke everyone up this morning. Probably will get into trouble with the guys out there later, myself. But anyway, hope you got something out of the guest speaker's presentation. Now, I thought it was interesting. We all have different takes from people's presentations. I hope you got something out of it yourself. Now, what the unit chair usually would try to do is to organize at least one opportunity of a guest speaker. Now, Dr. Jane Menzies, who I work closely with, is going on maternity leave. And so this trimester, I'm working with Professor Doran Chatty. So normally it will be Dr. Jane and myself. And so you at least got to meet with Dr. Jane this morning. So we wish her well. And she did try to organize a guest speaker for us. Now, I know there's a lot going on at the moment, even though it's just week 2. And last week, we had the first topic, globalization. But because we had Professor Chetty, that he came in and did a presentation, a bit of orientation into the unit. We actually didn't get time to go through the whole lot of the globalization slides. Now, I spoke to Doran, and Doran's view is that we should get the students to do their own independent learning. However, he has since posted some questions. Did you get to see Professor's questions? Now, he posted an announcement, and I thought I'll bring it to your attention, and a set of slides with 4 questions on globalization. Now, can I have a bit of show of hands? Did you manage to read through topic 1 globalization slides on your own? Very good, very good. Okay, wonderful. We have 3, if not 4 people in this group of so many students who managed to catch up on their own. We only got up to slide number 9 from memory. Okay, so I just want to emphasize globalization is a very, very important topic. Now, I mentioned last week it's the first topic, and ideally we orientate you into the study of international business using the first topic, globalization. But because we had spent so much time on the introduction, the unit orientation, we actually didn't get to finish the delivery of slides. And my understanding is that neither did the professor in the Wednesday afternoon or evening class. So if we get time, we can go back and revisit topic 1. But what I would like you to do is you need to revisit, if not in class with me, you need to revisit topic 1 because it is a very, very important topic because you need to understand what is globalization. Okay, it's an all exam favorite. I can guarantee you it will be examined. Usually in the section B questions because it's such an important topic. How can you study international business without understanding what is globalization? Now, last week, I mentioned this concept of DEA. Do you remember what it means? Yes? Nino, tell me. Define. Explain. Apply. So what about define? In trying to learn this new concept of globalization, what you should be doing is, if you don't understand what globalization actually means, to provide a definition. So what is globalization? Can somebody tell me what is globalization? Brent, I'm going to pick on you. Because you put up your hand before that you caught up with the lecture.
Globalization is, I'm not sure how to explain it properly.
You can give me examples if you want.
For businesses, it's like when the productions are spread over many other countries,
Right.
and also or their markets will be also spread over many countries, not just their local country, but some other countries internationally as well.
Okay.
For business globalization.
Sure. So you're talking about the globalizing of production. Nino, do you want to have a go?
When you're an individual or a company doing a business outside of the country, outside of its own country,
Okay.
one country, that's
So you're talking about doing
doing
international business outside of your home country.
it's an individual or a company,
Okay.
and some other people are also involved there, and it takes social responsibilities as well, is involved in so many areas.
Okay.
And some other people also get benefit out of it.
Good. Okay, we're going into the details of globalization. Anyone else want to have a go at the definition of globalization? Yes, please. Thank you.
It's the intensification of the exchange of goods and services.
Okay. Could you provide me an example?
Maybe the stock market, or international trade.
Okay, all right, we're heading in the right direction. Previously, we would talk about the Indian market, the Australian market, the Malaysian market, the Chinese market, the Thai market. But today, we're talking about a global market. So globalization is the previously independent markets becoming more integrated together as one. So the previous, national boundaries where we kind of talk about selling into the Indian market or the US market cease to make any meaning when we talk about today's global market. So it's the globalizing of production, the globalizing of markets. What drives globalization?
Growth of national economy, like per capita and GDP.
GDP, so you're talking about economics, economic growth?
Yeah, economic growth of the country.
Okay. Anyone else? Availability of resources. Tell me a little bit more about availability of resources.
Like in certain countries, some resources are not available, so it will cost more to produce a certain good in one country, but compared to that, in some country the resources is in abundance. So
Okay.
to produce that product in that country, it will cost less.
All right, okay. We're almost going into factor endowments and all that. We're going into trade theories very soon. So we'll talk a bit more about resources and all that. But if you don't understand what is globalization, how can you answer a question in the exam? So what I said last week was, any new concepts that you learn, you must learn by trying to clarify your own understanding of the concept. And because it is new, why don't we start with first providing a definition? When I ask you about globalization, not many of you can give me a very definitive kind of answer. You kind of mention this, mention that, but you can't really put it in concrete terms. Try to, from now on a week-by-week basis, it really just takes a little bit of organization to think about the key concepts as you go through the program, okay? Little bit at a time.
As I said last week, you do the ordinary things extraordinarily well. You're super organized. You download all the material. You prepare before class. You come to class. Then you recap the concepts again. Then you test yourself with questions such as explain what globalization means by first providing a definition. Then you explain it a bit further using specific examples. Why is it that previously we would talk about the Indian market, the US market, but today we talk about these global markets? So what drives globalization? Technology, the advancement of technology, the gradual lowering of trade barriers, the setting up of global institutions, right? So all these are important. Now you remember last week, the professor asked you to read news on a daily basis, not the news feed just on social media, but legitimate news providers to see what's happening around the world. If you look around everywhere, evidence of globalization. The mere fact that we have international students coming to Australia to study is a sign of globalization. What did you have this morning? You may have some goods that's from your home country, which previously may not be readily available in Australia, but due to globalization, we can readily enjoy food from any parts of the world. The cars we drive, which is all part of international business as well. So this is a very important topic. Not that we want to torture you by giving you a question in the exam, in the essay type answers. Without doubt, there's always one question on globalization because it's such an important topic. Now, I don't want to give you the answer to these questions. I want you to do these questions. We can go through them, but the fact that you haven't seen these questions being posted, I just want to bring it to your attention. Now, I think Professor had posted the announcement in the announcement area. If you haven't seen that announcement, which also means you would not have seen my announcement as well, which is I'm running a BB Collaborate session this evening. What time am I running the session? 8 o'clock in the evening. So I'm giving up my private family time to conduct this session for you, okay? So instead of sitting in front of the TV or spending time with my family, I'm going to run this session week 2, 8 to 9 for our online students to answer questions that they may have for the first 2 weeks. Now, if you're on-campus students, you're also welcome to log on. But chances are I will give priority to the online students to ask their questions first. Now, Professor wants me to run only for 1 hour. Some trimesters will run them for 2 hours, but this trimester will run it for 1 hour, so I have to be really super efficient with responding to all students' questions. Now, these seminars, online seminars, is where I can sit anywhere, log on to Cloud Deacon, have my earphone and speak to you. You see me on video and hear me on audio as well. You come on, you can ask questions, you can show your face if you want to show your face. Otherwise, you just type the messages, I respond, or you come on and we have an interactive session. Now, for my online students, they probably, I'm hoping they would have done those questions, we'll be able to go through them together. But if they haven't, I will do the same thing and ask them to try to answer those questions. Now, I want to run these sessions, I want to run our program, our weekly program, more fun and engaging. However, there is the requirement for me to deliver the bare, at least some contents that you need to understand the course. And so that's why the professor has provided questions like these for you to test your understanding of the key concepts and questions. If you do them along the way, it will not be so much of a chore and you would actually learn a great deal of the weekly topics. Another thing I want to bring to your attention is the available resources on a week-by-week basis. And the first week there is that kind of video about globalization, which you should have a look. Interesting video. okay, documentary on globalization. And if you read the whole thing from objectives, from introduction to objectives to learning resources, all the way down, you will see the lecture notes and also the case study called Shoes of Prey that we were meant to discuss in week 1. In addition, we asked down here after watching the video, if students could please reflect on what globalization means to you as an individual, because we want to know, how does globalization affect you as an individual? How does it affect local communities? How does it affect companies? How does it affect countries or even regions in the world or the world as a whole? How does it affect factory workers versus knowledge workers like yourselves? So what does globalization mean to you? In no more than 200 words, post your answer to topic 1 discussion board on your reflection on how globalization has impacted or changed your life and how it might influence what you do in the future. So if you had sort of covered the material carefully, you would have seen this, and perhaps you could have posted that question, that response to that question on Cloud Deacon to share with your peers. I would strongly encourage you to do so. Some trimesters we have very active discussion space. Some trimesters we have very quiet discussion space. So it is entirely up to you. I call this a community of practice. If you want it to be a learning community, then you yourself have to take that first step by sharing with your peers. If everyone's shy, everyone's quiet, and nobody will share, no one will pose a question, then we won't learn from each other. There's so many people here with different perspectives, so many diverse experiences. I would love to hear from you. Now, this trimester, I am not in charge of monitoring the discussion spaces, but it's still interesting as you go in and have a look at what people are posting. Professor Chatty will be the one answering those questions or responding to your queries. But I would still hope that you would post questions in the discussion spaces, or even post some interesting news articles that you come across, or some interesting clips, or something you wish to share with your peers about globalization. So please do have a look at the learning resources and take time to think about the concepts that you're learning, such as globalization. So what does it mean? So maybe you can provide first a definition, and then think about what are the causes of globalization, what drives globalization, what are the consequences of globalization, why are factories shutting down in developed nations, why are all the labor jobs going to developing nations, why are companies sending their sort of low-end, kind of more manual labor to developing countries? What are they trying to do? And how does it affect individuals like yourself? How does it affect communities, countries? So if you think deep enough, you understand the concepts better. So globalization, for question 4, is only relevant for international business. Do you agree or disagree with this statement? Explain your position fully. Please have a look at these questions, and if you have really done them, we can go through them in class next week, because globalization is a very important topic, and it is also very interesting, because once you understand globalization, it's a starting point, then you understand so many other concepts much better. So this week we're looking at the role of culture, and we had an interesting guest speaker presentation. So it got us into kind of the mood about culture. So these are the learning objectives. Know what it meant by the culture of a society. Now, if I ask you what is culture, what would you tell me? Say in Australia, when we say culture, what do you think of? Values and beliefs, okay? Anyone else? Customs and traditions. Have you been reading your lecture notes? What about customs and traditions?
Like how the way of doing things, the perspective towards life.
Okay.
How, you know,
Okay.
they go toward, like the way they plan trading or however, like the business or general life, everything.
Sure. Nino, did you want to add something? Yes.
From the early in the morning, the people, how they greet each other. What is the culture? Well, how they, at the offices, how they treat each other, for example. What is the rules and regulations, working hours, women at work, not work at late hours, also the dressing, also eating, and religious, everything. And yes, it's very complex.
It is very complex.
Yes, and
Sure.
from nation to nation, and globalization trying somehow to shift and integrate this type of things among the nations through the trades or through conducting your businesses, etc. And it's become more and more quite familiar to other nations as well.
Okay. I don't think there's much more for people to add after that. Anyone else want to add anything to culture? Your take of culture? Anyone from the back? I'm not going to forget about people at the back. Or maybe I'll start with the middle. Tell me, what's your take of culture?
Culture is basically what we believe, like in Australia or in Western like US. People
Okay.
believe that you can work only for 8 hours, that's their perspective. But when you come to Asia, the working hours are longer. So that's also what we have in cultural belief.
Okay, but there are rules around that. For example, labour laws in Australia that dictates how long we work, how much rest we get, a break and so on. So it's also what is compliance, in terms of what is allowed and what is not allowed. What about this table? Josh, because I finally remember your name, Josh. What's your take of culture?
I think everyone said it, because
What's your own individual take of culture?
it's the way people act.
The way people act, so the way I dance or the way I...
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, like, you see, like, different culture, different dances.
All right. Okay. All right.
But yeah, that's like what they said. It's how people act in terms of interaction, in terms of, yeah, including business.
Okay, including business. So how we conduct our business. Right. Anyone else? Does culture mean the same thing to everyone? Yeah? I see a gentleman nodding. So can you tell me why you say culture means the same thing to everyone?
I'm actually not in agreement.
Oh, okay.
So basically, it's the way people eat, the way people dress, the way
Okay.
people do business, and the way people see the outside world and all that.
All right, that's a good point. So the way people dress, people act, the way that people see the outside world. Okay, we're getting somewhere interesting, outside world. Yes.
I think something important to also note is the perspective, because people can only rely on what they've experienced to define what culture means to them.
So our own frames of reference and...
Family, friends, the arts that they're exposed to.
Oh, very good. History, friends, art, family. What about you? You put up your hand earlier, you said you're from Vietnam, is that right? So in terms of Vietnamese culture, what do you value the most?
Well, I think the most valuable about Vietnamese culture is like we based on families.
Okay.
Yeah, so we live and we work as families, as a whole group as together.
So family is very important. Sure, thank you very much. Now, what about students from India? What's important in Indian culture? May I get any? Yes?
I think respecting your elders, I think that's a big thing, and that's very important in the workplace as well.
Okay.
You just assume that everyone has to respect their elders, irrespective of how they work.
So people from the Indian culture would know that you need to respect the elders. So if there's someone older in the audience, we naturally, give them the first opportunity to speak. And in a community, we will respect the most senior person. Okay, thank you very much. Now, is religion important? Now, I have many very religious Indian students who say to me they are guided by religion. Okay, so religion also play a role in influencing the way we live, the way we interact with each other, what is acceptable behavior, what is not. Now, people from one culture will understand that culture, but people outside of that culture may not necessarily understand that culture. Am I right? I will pretend that I understand Indian culture. I can pretend that I understand the Malaysian culture or Sri Lankan culture, German culture, but I will only have superficial understanding. It is only people in that community, that social group, that cultural group, that they fully understand what it means about Indian culture, about German culture, and so on. Okay, so it's about that kind of how you are socialized into that cultural group. How did you learn about your culture? Who taught you? Tradition. But before tradition, when you were a baby, who taught you? Your parents, your grandparents, your extended family? Yeah? Who teach me? I mean, no, I don't even remember, but if there's grandparents on the same table, we don't pick up our chopsticks to eat until they pick up their chopsticks to eat. All right? We give the seat to the elderly. Who taught me this? I grew up in Australia, but who taught me this? My parents. How I was socialized into that culture, how I was brought up. So we cannot assume that people will understand the culture that you're from, okay, unless they have experienced it, they've lived there, for example, expatriates, but even so, they may not have that kind of in-depth understanding of that culture. So why are we studying culture in international business? Why do we need to understand culture? Yes. Okay. So the question is, why do we need to study culture in international business?
My own perspective, I think, if you're going to do business in China, you need to study their culture, know what you could actually, put into that community and economy that would, so culture is very vital in any business because you can't go to India and do something that is contrary to their culture and you expect them to, buy or kind of patronize you and all that. So you would only be a flop if you do that.
Okay, that's
or you try and introduce it and make them feel it's worth having or something. But culture is very important. It's very vital in any business atmosphere.
Okay, very good. Now, I'm going to ask this gentleman.
Me?
Yes. So what's your take on culture?
Culture is basically something that your parents teach you.
Okay.
Your society around you teaches you
when
you grow up, and they expect you to follow that throughout your life.
All right, so I just asked the question about why is culture important in international business, and the gentleman provided a very good response. Now, what did you learn from his response?
I actually didn't listen to his response.
Okay, precisely my point. One person speak at a time. Let's set some ground rules so that we can be respectful of each other's comments and all that, because we've got a wealth of experience here. We got such diverse background and we got such rich, stories to share with each other. I would love to hear from you all. And this is a perfect topic for us to get to know one another and understand and be, a bit more mindful about cultural differences. Thank you very much.
No worries, I can give the answer as well.
Yes, please.
For culture. So yeah, culture is very important as a business if you want to penetrate a market somewhere. So you need to understand the culture,
Yes.
and then only you'll be able to go into the market and make a space for yourself. So.
Okay, so why is understanding the culture so important in penetrating that market?
Because, you know, if you're going to a new place,
Yes.
and for example, you're going to a country which is very, very conservative, and you want to open a business of something that is totally Western. You know,
Okay.
for example, you go to some Asian country and you want to introduce a burger joint, you know.
Okay.
So you need to understand their taste buds and what kind of burger they'll like, you know. Because they might not like the chicken burger the way Americans eat it. They might like it with the Chinese flavor and all those things, you know.
Sure,
In
so you
that
may
way,
have
yeah.
to make some customization to your
Exactly.
product offering.
Exactly,
Okay,
that's what-
very good. Okay, well done. Now, the reason I'm talking about all this is because sometimes students think this topic is not important because it's airy-fairy, it's one of those soft topics we can just skip. It's not finance, it's not calculation, but do you know, all else equal, culture is one of the most influential factor in business. If you don't get it right, you could potentially lose a deal, right? So it pays to understand culture. So in this week, we are looking at culture. We want you to start thinking about what determines culture. When we talk about determinants of culture, what is it? Religion, values, customs, maybe even the country's political systems, legal systems, all the norms and all that, things that we take for granted when you're actually from that culture. But when somebody asks you, what is Indian culture, what is Sri Lankan culture, what is Chinese culture, what is Georgian culture, right? So, you know, you will have to think, oh, how do I define my culture? Sometimes it's non-verbal, you just know, it's tacit knowledge, but you can't explain it. It's like, you know, what is it, how can I explain it, right? And it is so clear and so obvious to you, but it is so strange and so foreign to other people. Just like what the gentleman said, if you want to penetrate that new market, you have to understand that local culture. There are also subcultures. So if you don't understand the culture, you risk to offend your host country. Explain Hofstede's study and dimensions of culture. Explain how differing social environments of different countries can affect international business. Explain how these difficulties of culture can affect international business operations. McDonald's have to change their product offering when they go into India, right? Because of religious beliefs and reasons, cows are sacred. Therefore, they do not eat beef. They have to be respectful of that, right? So here we are, we have a Starbucks in China, culture clash. Starbucks cafe operating in the grounds of China's Forbidden City. How many of you have visited China's Forbidden City? No one? Not one single student? Seriously? Anyway, I was there for a conference. Only briefly, I did go to the Forbidden City and I did see this Starbucks before it was closed down. So this most sacred place in China, you know, all palace and all that, and in the middle of nowhere there's Starbucks. Now, no one complained at that point in time because, you know, we needed a drink, we went in, we ordered a coffee and we sat down. You know, a few of our conference colleagues, we attended conference together, we decided to visit the Forbidden City in Beijing. But later on, we heard that Starbucks was actually shut down because apparently there were lots of complaints over Starbucks, you know, brash illuminated signages which clash with the symbolism of China's cultural heritage. And also the use of green was also a problem. So there were petitions that started by a TV anchorman to close down Starbucks and all rename it under the palace name. So over about 500,000 signatures gathered, and sometime later, Starbucks was closed down. I had the privilege of visiting it before it was shut down. Not that it's the right thing, but you know, I just happened to be there, and I probably was sitting, you know, around maybe a little bit to the left, looking out of the window, enjoying a cup of coffee in the most sacred place of China. It's amazing. So it makes you really wonder, what is culture? In today's world, China is very, very modern. You go to large cities like Shanghai and you don't even know you're in China, right? So there must be all this happening in every part of the world. There must be cities in India that's becoming much more westernized as well, versus more maybe the rural cities. Same everywhere. So Starbucks in Forbidden City got shut down. So why I ask about culture, why is culture important? Because successful international managers need to have that cross-cultural literacy. Basically, we're saying we need to gain some sort of understanding of how cultural differences can impact on the way business is conducted. Right? How do you give out your name cards? Just give it like that? Or do you like? Yeah. And do you take a moment to look at the person's name card very carefully? Flip it around, look at the translated version. If you're given a name card over the weekend at a family barbecue or friend's barbecue, and there just happened to be a stubby beer, oh, perfect. Just put the name card underneath. That's a big no-no, isn't it? I've heard of Chinese managers complaining about how they were treated. They gave the name cards and someone just put it underneath a bottle of beer. Right, so little things like that. Very superficial things, little things, but it may just make a very bad impression, first impression. But those are just superficial little things. But beyond that, there's much more, such as the dominant religion of that country. If you're operating in a new territory and you don't know about the country factors, such as the cultural factors, how can you do business successfully there? So for your assignments, your second assignment, or rather assignment 1, part 2, country report, there is a part where we want you to look at the country factors / social culture, cultural factors. So if you picked India as your country, remember you have to first form a group of 3. Have you formed your group of 3? Yes? Yes? Good. If not, post a question, a recruiting message on Cloud Deacon, or later on talk to each other to see if you can form your group as soon as possible, because remember, your group proposal of a product or a service idea needs to be submitted in a group of 3, and it is due when? Week 3. Okay, so we're sitting on week 2. It's only 500 words. Really, there's not much that you need to write. You pretty much just have to give me your 3 names, your product idea, the 3 countries. So your product or service idea, is it a tangible product? Is it a service? Is it some sort of solution? Be clear about your idea that you're proposing. The 3 countries you wish to take your product or service into, that's the first step. Who are your team members? Who are they? Which person is doing which country? And give me a little bit of kind of rationale in terms of why you picked this idea and these 3 countries. That's it. 500 words. You can't possibly, fail from that. The only time we will reject your idea is maybe it's just something that's illogical, not feasible, or the countries of choice are not practical for your idea. As I have mentioned earlier, if you say, I'm going to propose a ski hiring service in Malaysia, it's ridiculous. There's no snow. Yet we received this type of proposal. Okay, so think carefully about what you're putting together. All right? Otherwise, it just doesn't make sense. So, the second part, the country report, will require you to think about country factors, and culture is one of them, because you need to understand the country's culture before you can have successful business in that country. So if your country is India, but you can't be born in that country, so if you're born in India, you can't pick that as your country. Remember, that's the condition. So you need to think about what are the cultural factors that would impact on the way we do business in India, if that is your country of choice. So a relationship may exist between culture and cost of doing business in that country or that region. For example, a Muslim country, we cannot have what? Pork, right? We also cannot consume alcohol. So if you're making if you're proposing a particular product that has high alcohol content and you want to export it into a Muslim country, then I will immediately reject your proposal because it's illogical. Or if your product will contain traces of kind of pork, then you have to think of other alternatives. That's why companies will need to do their homework as well in terms of country factors. Now, we'll talk a bit more about the country reports at a later stage. So culture may affect understanding the market and consumers, consumer tastes and preferences that gentleman mentioned earlier, setting up the business in the country and relationship with the government. Relationship with the government is very, very important. If you have the support of the government, you can do a lot more. So government can play a very important role. Managing ongoing operations and staff. So we talked about culture as a system of values and norms. What is value? Is value something you can describe? So it's a system of values and norms that are shared among a group of people that when taken together constitute the design of living. So if I ask Indian students what is Indian culture, you will understand. But if I ask Chinese students about Indian culture, they may not be able to completely get it right. So values are kind of abstract ideas. Sometimes we don't even know what our values are. Now, the gentleman earlier talked about respect for elders, which is fantastic. It's very clear, we understand that. But sometimes the values are so abstract that people outside of that cultural group don't understand what is that value. And it is what the group believes to be good, right, or desirable. But people outside of that group might just find it bizarre and something really strange and they cannot comprehend. Norms are the social rules and guidelines that prescribe appropriate behavior in particular situations. So if you have a group of Indian students working on assignments together, you probably understand what are the expectations, how things work, maybe your orientation of time and so on. Whereas if you have like a Indian student, a German student, a Australian student working together, you may have to first discuss some ground rules because there may be differences in terms of expectations and belief systems. So society refers to a group of people who share a common set of values and norms. As I say, what are your values? You may not know. Now there's something that absolutely drives me crazy. That is people throwing rubbish in public land. Right? It absolutely drives me crazy. When I go picnic and I see people just leave behind their rubbish, I get really angry. Just because no one's policing the public land, the park, doesn't mean it gives them the right to throw rubbish there. And people are quite comfortable just throw rubbish. That is something I cannot accept. So that's my values, that's my beliefs. But that's not everyone's beliefs or everyone's values. Hofstede defined culture as the collective programming of the mind, which distinguishes the members of one human group from another. Culture in this sense includes values, we talked about, systems of values, are a core element of culture. But it is not always possible for people outside of that culture to understand what it means, because culture is a learned behavior. Who taught you your cultural values? Your parents, your grandparents, your teachers, your peers, the school that you went to, your principal, maybe, your aunties and aunties and uncles. It's passed down intergeneration between parents and their children, or maybe even intra-generation between peers. Culture reflects a learned behavior. What if an Indian child or a Malaysian child is adopted from young, and the adoptive parents are Westerners? He or she may learn a different set of culture, because culture is a learned behavior. So elements of culture may be interrelated. So combination of the different elements of culture can influence a way society functions. It may be very strange for aliens to see us if they come and invade Earth. They see us, we're all doing things, living our lives. What are they doing? If I have time, I will do some cultural, experiential exercises with you. There's a game that we can play, but I don't have sufficient time because we have to deliver this content. There's this game that we used to play when I run the MBA courses, and we would get students a set of rules. This particular culture need to behave like this. Only women can speak, men cannot speak. And to do anything, you have to join hands and do a dance. Okay? So, all right, people from that culture would understand the acceptable behavior. Then people, another cultural group may be that only men are allowed to talk. Women are not allowed to talk. Women are supposed to just sit there quietly in the corner and wait for the men to bring things to her. Right? So it may be perfectly normal, and people very quickly get into the role and they play out that role in that cultural group. And then you see them try to trade with each other, and interesting behavior. And then we talk about it afterwards. It can be anything, any type of experiences that's foreign that get us to think about culture. What really is culture? Now, it is said culture can be adaptive. It can change over time. Now, I've heard from my students, international students, complaining, the older ones that is, the more mature ones, talking about the dilution of their home culture. How, Ruby, things are not the same anymore. The youth of my country are changing. They're becoming more westernized. I said, be careful. The moment you talk like that, you're getting old. Don't talk like that. All right, adapt with time. So culture can change, can be adaptive. Culture is shared by members of society. It defines who is a member of the inner group versus the outer group. So someone on the outer will not understand that culture. He or she needs to be socialized into that culture. So a question for the international students, when you first arrived in Australia, was the Australian culture a bit foreign to you? So it would take you some time to adjust. But now that you have adjusted, when you go back home, your friends will say, you're strange, you've changed, right? And this is quite often what happens to people who travel overseas and they return home and no one has changed, everyone stayed the same, but you've changed and you find things strange, right? Sometimes even the expatriates have to go through that process of being repatriated back to their home country again. And we'll talk a bit more about that in the topic of human resources, international human resources management at a later time. So culture is very important. We often use our self-referencing criteria. Who say what we think is the most righteous or the correct way? It may not be, but we always use our own values to judge people, right? Acculturation is a process that we go through, okay, adapting personal behavior to make it compatible to the prevailing cultures. So if you spend a reasonable amount of time in another country, say 1 month, what adaptation did you make? Well, maybe you get used to climate there, get used to the smell of certain food that maybe initially you dislike, but eventually you like it and you miss it when you go back home. You say, oh, gee, I would just, just pay for that again, I really want that, right? So, expatriates will need to be trained and prepared for their foreign assignment depending on how long are they going to be away. If they're going to be away for a longer period, a longer assignment, international assignment, they generally have to have a more of a cultural immersion type of program prepared for them versus some sort of more superficial training about that particular culture. So when we talk about culture, we talk about values and norms. Value provide the context within which a society's norms are established and justified and form the bedrock of a culture. What do we mean by that? Well, what's our attitude towards time? Now, I used to conduct management training and development programs for multinationals, work with some colleagues, and one particular opportunity took us to Thailand. Beautiful country, beautiful people, beautiful food. I got used to the chili very quickly. Now, the concept of time is very different. So this is a multinational company and we have European managers versus the local Thai managers. So we say, oh, I'll be back here at 11. The local Thai people will start rocking up at maybe 5 past or 10 past 11. Now the Germans, 11:15 is already inside the conference room. The concept of time is very different. Not that there's anything wrong, but they get really frustrated because they don't understand. How could they? We said 11 o'clock. So relax. This is a training program. We're meant to establish some understanding of each other. What about our concept of age? Now, the gentleman earlier said that in Indian culture, you respect your elders. Many Asian cultures do that. What about social status or class or caste? Now, in Australia, we tend to have more of a flat type of structure. We are less focused on class. Not to say it doesn't exist, it does. But we tend to be a little bit more laid back, more relaxed around social status. Education level. Does your culture put a lot of emphasis on getting people educated? Do they respect someone who's educated? Do they hold them in high regard? Okay. Authority figures. Sometimes in some cultures they are highly hierarchical, right? They respect the authority, they're fearful of the authority. In some cultures, don't worry about it, we don't care. So these are the differences, and unless you have a good understanding about the respective cultures, it is very, very hard to do business. This is our American text, so they talk about folk ways and mores, so the routine conventions of everyday life, little moral significance, generally social conventions such as dress codes, the way we dress, social manners, neighbourly behaviour. The mores refer to the norms central to the functioning of a society and the social life, greater significance in the folk ways. Violation can bring about serious retribution. As a society, we say adultery is wrong, incest is wrong, cannibalism is wrong, theft is wrong. Now in Australia, in Melbourne, if you drink and drive, you will get caught by the police and you'll get a hefty fine. You might get your license suspended. So we say no to drink driving because society as a whole want a safe environment. We want to know that when we drive on the roads, there's not going to be drunken people driving at the same time, endangering him or herself and also you, right? If you go through a traffic light, you will get a fine as well. So society as a whole decide what is acceptable behavior and what is not. When you go to the coffee shop, you line up diligently with your cup, to buy a coffee, and someone cut the queue. Does it make you angry? Yeah? Some people don't. Some people, all right, I'll jump the queue to the front, right? So what is acceptable to you may not be acceptable to others. So a society is a group of people bound together by a common culture. There's not a strict one-to-one correspondence between society and a nation state. When we talk about nation state, we mean like a political creation. It may contain a single culture or several cultures. So in India, you have different cultures within India as well, isn't it? So people from the Indian culture will understand, whereas people from the outside, they might just say Indian culture, but it's vastly different. Another exam favorite. Now, along the way, I will remind you. Another exam favorite is the professor or whoever's the unit chair like to ask you a question, what determines culture? What are the elements of culture? What are the determinants of culture? Why? Because it makes sense. Religion can influence the way we behave. It even influences how we dress, how we conduct ourselves, what we eat, what we're allowed to eat, not allowed to eat, what we can do, what we cannot do, the political philosophy of that country, the nation state, the economic philosophy, level of education, social structure. Now, in some cultures, there's a very, very strict kind of guidance, principles of life. People from one particular caste or class cannot mix with the other caste or class, cannot marry each other. Language. There may be the official language, but there may be other dialects as well. So language play a very important role. So without understanding what determines culture, how can you talk about culture? Just like globalization as a new concept. You think you know about culture, but you know what? Every time when a question pops up about culture, almost half of the students fail because they cannot explain what is culture. They seem to understand what is culture, but when they try to write something down, they cannot explain it. So try to define, explain, and apply again. Social structure. When we talk about social structure, it's a society basic social organization, how we organize the society. Two dimensions to consider: the degree to which the basic unit of social organization is the individual versus the group. So some cultures, for example, Asian cultures are more collective cultures. We care about the collective goods of the group rather than the individual gain, right? So we don't talk about individual gain because that's wrong. How can you do that? You're so selfish. But in the Western culture, it's everyone for themselves. However, everyone work hard, everyone be proactive, and society as a whole prosper and grow. It's a different kind of concept. So the degree to which a society is stratified into classes or castes. So you need to understand what determines culture, and social structure is one. So remember this diagram. In the exam, it doesn't matter. If you draw me diagrams, it'll be fantastic. Imagine marking all these exams. You see a diagram, you love it. Wow, there's a picture. Yeah, look at the artwork. Draw a diagram if it helps you remember. Why must learning be boring? How many artists in the audience? Anyone in the art profession? No. Our parents all told us not to become an artist, we end up on the street, right? That's a typical thing. Yes. My parents said the same thing to me because I wanted to study art. So, a group, what do we mean by a group? It's an association of two or more people. We can't say a person is a group. There needs to be more than one person. Have a shared sense of identity, who interact with each other in a very structured way on the basis of a common set of expectations about each other's behavior, right? So think about culture as you're forming your assignment groups. If you're forming an assignment group with people that are not from your culture, be mindful that they may not understand your expectations, nor would they understand your norms. So communicate, okay? Communicate with each other. Societies may differ in terms of the degree to which a group is viewed as a primary means of social organization. All these are just words. It doesn't mean anything if you just read it, but try to make sense of it. Think about your culture. This is where the application comes in, okay? So in many Western societies, there's a focus on the individual, and individual achievement is common. This constitutes the dynamism of the US economy and many Western economy because there's high levels of creativity and entrepreneurship. Some cultures have less of that kind of entrepreneurial activity. In fact, some cultures may not encourage risk-taking. Think about your upbringing. When you made a mistake in school setting, what did your teacher do? Yeah? Yeah? Or verbally tell you off. And organizations that you work for, are you allowed to take risks? Measure risk, I tell you. Be creative, but not too outrageously creative. So how can you be a learning organization if you're punished every time you make a mistake? You will cease to have creativity and innovation. So we need to think about the very way of operation, all right? So in understanding culture, you will also understand that we have different norms, different values. Organizations also have organizational culture. Deakin has Deakin culture, right? Sometimes it's not spoken, but people know how it should behave within Deakin University. At the beginning of each unit, they remind you of your rights and responsibilities. So very quickly you act and behave like a Deakin University student. You're socialized into this Deakin set of values and belief systems, right? When you go to an organization, you get induction, don't you? HR will organize some sort of meetings, trainings, information sessions, and they induct you into the organization. They talk about what is acceptable behavior and what is not acceptable behavior. So, individuals and groups. Okay, so imagine this is a line of continuum, okay, left and right. Individualism over there, collectivism over there. Indian culture. Tell me when to stop. This way? Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. When do I stop? Nah. Okay. Really collectivist. Australian culture. Now my Australian students have to tell me. Start again. Individualist, collectivist. Which way do I go? Okay, tell me when to stop. All the way, you reckon? Yeah, you reckon? About there, okay. So this gentleman think very individualist. This lady here think about here. Okay, interesting. Now, I want you to think about just a simple concept like individualism versus collectivism. That things we take for granted from that culture. If you're from a collectivist culture, you understand how you need to behave. Respect the elders, respect certain social hierarchy, all those things that you take for granted. People from an individualist culture may not understand. So you have to then explain to them, if they are your assignment partners, they will then need to explain to you. So, when they talk about this entrepreneurship, typically in countries like US or Western countries, it encourages kind of risk-taking, creativity, and therefore the country can prosper. All right? So I want you to think about your culture. How is it different to, say, Australian culture? And try to think of it in a more lively manner so that you understand truly what culture means. Now, in many Asian societies, the group is the primary unit of social organization. I used to run consultation hours for almost all the units that I teach. Now, this trimester, I don't have the consultation hours. So if you want to see someone, you have to make a time with Professor Chatty. Go and see him. Okay? So they don't allocate me the consultation time. So I would sit upstairs with that 1 hour I think 1 hour allocated consultation time. Inevitably, my international students will come together, a group. So if, I don't know, Rohit made an appointment, Vikas will come with Rohit. Okay, it's never Vikas on his own or Rohit on his own. It's always Vikas and Rohit, Rohit and Vikas, for example, right? And whereas if it's an Australian student that made the appointment, he or she will come on his own or her own. So behavior is different. So I want you to think about our concept of individuals and groups, things that we take for granted, but it may be really clear to you, it may not be clear to other people, and it can impact on the way we do business. Social strata, okay, how the society is stratified on a hierarchical basis into social categories. While all societies are stratified to a certain extent, they differ by the degree of mobility between social strata, the significance attached to social strata in business context. So is social strata or an individual's caste important in business in India? Is it important? Very important, isn't it? And people from India would understand why. But outsiders may take some time to understand how things are done in India. Same goes if we go to another country, the Netherlands, or China, or any other country, we have to take time to understand what is that country's norm, what is acceptable kind of cultural behavior. Social mobility. Now, in some cultures, people from a particular caste or class cannot change, cannot move at all. It's a closed system. If you're born into that caste, you're that caste. There's no way of changing. Now, in some cultures, the class system is much more flexible, right? So people can go from one to the next and people can move between different classes. And people may work hard and they may be able to change their life. But in some cultures, it is closed system, others open. The social stratification of a society is significant if it affects the way we do business. We need to understand and we need to be respectful as well, because that's how it's operated in that country, whether we like it or not. Class consciousness is a condition where people tend to perceive themselves in terms of their class background. Now, this may be very foreign to our Western students because we have less of that kind of concept here. Now, in cultures where class consciousness is high, The way individuals from different classes work together may be very prescribed and strained, right? If we don't know, we may not understand why certain students from a particular country never sit together, right? So, or never work together. Religion. Now, there's so many different religions in the world. Now, I must say, whatever is published, data that's published, for example, on PowerPoint slides, in the textbook, and mind you, these set of slides are probably a bit older. I will let Professor know as well. Now, they were already uploaded, so we basically just go through this with you, but I would encourage you, if you want the most recent data, you need to search for the most current information. So religion is a system of shared beliefs and rituals that are concerned with the realm of the sacred. Some religions believe God's everywhere. Others have a very clear sense of who's God, who's sacred. Ethical systems are a set of moral principles or values that are used to guide or shape individual or collective's behavior. Most of the world's ethical systems are product of religion. So have you ever thought about the way you behave, how it is influenced by your religion? Are you religious? Now, I had an Indian student who visited me, and at the end of the meeting, he wanted to touch my foot. Hey, it's the first time. I didn't expect that, but it was meant to be respectful. Am I right? Okay, so I was educated. I was flattered. I was like, oh, wow, okay, yes, thank you. Yes, perhaps also because he's a male student, I was just a little bit taken back. But he was so sincere, and I was very touched. I was very touched. So, you know, it influenced the way we behave, influenced everything that we do. And I was taken back, overwhelmed by the tradition, the culture. Incredible. So among thousands of religions in the world today, 4 dominate in terms of the numbers of adherents: Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism. Now those figures I suspect are quite dated already. You may look up the most recent data for the accurate numbers. Now, people who said they don't have a religion also account some 775 millions of adherents. So this is from the www.religioustolerance.org. Now, I want to remind you about using credible data for your assignment at a later stage. Don't just quote anything. Use more credible data, like the Australian Bureau of Statistics, Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, World Bank, and so on. Those are credible sources. If you just find some information from some weird website, chances are the marker will mark you down because it's not a credible source. We'll talk a bit more about credible sources at a later stage. We are in the middle of organizing the librarian to come and speak with you to do a presentation around week 4. Hopefully that will go ahead. We will let you know. So this is a map showing the different religions in the world. So you can see from the key, Christianity, I can hardly read it, Hinduism, Buddhism, Islam, Judaism, just to name a few of the well-known religions. So Christianity, most widely practiced religion in the world. Approximately 20% of the world's people identify themselves as Christians. Christians grew out of Judaism, so has a monotheistic beliefs. Christianity can be subdivided into 3 separate kind of organizations: the Orthodox Church, the Roman Catholic Church, or the Protestants, which kind of is an umbrella of several different denominations. Now, there's economic implications of religion. In some religions, making money is acceptable. In other religions, it's considered wrong. Profit is not acceptable. So you need to understand the implications of the key religion, the dominant religion, if you're operating in that country, and how religion will impact on your workforce. If you employ people from a particular country and there's a particular dominant religion, you need to understand how is that going to impact on your organization, the way you conduct business, the way how you run the organization, and so on. Max Weber commented that the business leaders and owners of capital, as well as the higher grades of skilled labor and the higher technically commercially trained personnel of modern enterprises, are overwhelmingly Protestant. That Protestant ethics emphasize the importance of hard work and wealth creation. Is it true? Is it not true? You know, people from that religion will understand it much better. That the combination of hard work and accumulation of capital, which could be used to finance investment and expansion, paved the way of much of our Western capitalism. Okay, so many of our Western cultures are influenced by Protestants' belief systems. Islam. Okay, so here is another religion. Requires unconditional acceptance of the uniqueness, power and authority of God, and the understanding of the objective of life is to fulfill the dictates of His will in the hope of admission to paradise. Now do forgive me, I was given this set of slides. It's only a superficial coverage. For those of you who are very religious, you may be angered. How is my religion covered in only one single slide? I did not prepare the slides, so please forgive me. Okay, please forgive me. So this is according to the publishers. Other major principles of Islam, including honoring, respecting parents, respecting the rights of others, being generous, avoid killing, not committing adultery, and the list goes on. Most religion will teach you to do good, right? Economic implications. This is what we're interested in international business. For your country reports, when you have chosen your country and your proposal is approved, the next phase will be to undertake an individual country report. You need to consider the religion in that country. All right, so if that country is a Muslim country, what kind of implication it has on international business, on your type of product or service venturing into that country. You need to understand that. Okay? Hinduism. Now we have many students practice Hinduism, and I'm learning myself. I'm understanding a bit more. Each time students will educate me, will talk to me about it. All right, so if someone's from a Hindu background, how would that affect their way of life, the way they conduct themselves? Is it possible for them to consider wealth generation? So all these things that people outside of that culture, outside of that religion, may not fully understand. So we have an example here, McDonald's going into India. So when you order McDonald's in India, you probably realize they don't serve beef burgers, or do they? They don't, right? How might you expect to offer products in that country? Without the understanding of Hindu culture, they may make mistakes. In fact, they did, didn't they? With the fries being contaminated of beef a while back, and there was a lot of controversy around it. So did McDonald's handle the revelation that its French fries contain beef extract well? What would you have done differently? So you may want to read up a bit more about that. So international business need to be very aware of the dominant culture and religion of the country they are operating in, and be respectful of the host country culture. So are the cows really everywhere? I'm yet to visit India. Jane has. She told me they are everywhere. Okay. Buddhism, which is another dominant religion. So it stresses the spiritual growth and afterlife rather than the achievement while doing, our lives in this world. So Buddhism doesn't emphasize wealth creation. So entrepreneurial behavior is not stressed. So if you're from a Buddhist religious background, how does that affect your outlook of life? Your choice of profession, I wonder. Buddhism does not support the caste system. Individuals do have some mobility and can work with individuals from different classes. Confucianism. Now, when I grew up in Australia, people like to tease me, being Asian and all that. Say, Confucius say, what did Confucius say? I don't know. What did Confucius say? All right. So Confucianism, an ideology practiced mainly in China, teaches the importance of attaining personal salvation through the right actions. High morals, ethical conduct, and loyalty to others is essential in Confucianism. So the key teachings are about loyalty, reciprocal obligations, and honesty may all lead to the lowering of the cost of doing business in Confucian societies. So in China, what is important is 关系 and 面子, which is connections or relationships and face. Right? So if you entertain your Chinese guests, you must give them lots of face. What I mean by that is you must show respect, you must not humiliate them. Right? So you need to be aware that they place a lot of emphasis on preserving that face, that kind of relationship. They care about relationship. So when Western managers go to China, if they do not understand that concept, they may focus on the wrong things. Language is also another determinant of culture. Okay? So many different 6,000, 7,000 languages in the world, 10,000 different dialects worldwide. Now, when we talk about languages, we just assume that we can do translation. But sometimes meaning can be lost in translation. Also, culture take into the account of non-verbal kind of communication, right? A lot of my Asian students will not ask me questions in class, but they will all come to me when the class finishes. And I would never get to leave class. So what I have to do is say, let me log out of my computer because the other lecturer is coming in. Can we talk outside? And I will move outside and I will wait and then we will talk outside. But they will not ask me questions in class, right? Cultural differences. Languages. Sometimes they will want to ask me questions, but they don't directly tell me what's their question. They may have a request, may I have an extension of the assignment, but they will not ask me. But they may just circle around me, talk about the weather, do something. Now, Ruby, it may take them some time before they get to the point. But we have to be mindful of the cultural differences. So I have to read their body language, the facial expression. They probably will be reading my body language, my facial expression, except I show everything. So there's not much to read. What you see is what you get, right? I can't play poker cards. So when I say sorry, no, you can't get an extension. They might say, is it a real no? Or is it, one of those no that maybe will turn into maybe? No, that's definitely no. So the body language as well, personal space, right? Personal space is something. We don't have any people who I can intimidate. I gave a talk once in Melbourne Uni, and there's a lot of our local students, and some from Scottish background, and Italian background. The Italian students, if I go up and I put my hand on his shoulder, how's it going? He's perfectly comfortable, right? Others, it's like, don't touch me. We used to have an Italian colleague upstairs, a faculty member, Italian, but he doesn't like to be hugged. So we all take turns hugging him. Come here, Julian, give us a hug. He was like, no, get away from me. So culture can influence the way we behave, what is acceptable, what is not. Now people think about languages and they think all they have to do is to do translation, but be very careful about translation. Because translation, meaning can be lost along the way. So there's a lot of funny translation errors. So make sure when you translate something, you back translate, okay, to make sure the meaning stays the same and it doesn't get lost along the way. So there's some marketing disasters. High context versus low context cultures. Hall's 1976 work. I would encourage you to read up on high context versus low context cultures. So in high context cultures, attention is paid to the surroundings, circumstances for interpretation of the message. So it's not so much of what is verbalized, what is said, it's how it's said. What did she say? Did she say no in front of people? Did she say no in her classroom? Did she say no outside? You know, there's a lot of kind of like contextual kind of factors to consider. Low context cultures, most of the information is conveyed in the message itself. Yes or no, clear cut. Good communication is one that is direct and doesn't leave room for interpretation. But people from high context cultures don't like that. They think that's too brash, too direct. You hurt the person's feelings, right? I think I have to wrap it up a bit, soften it a bit, and then reject him or reject her. Okay, education is very important. Now, different cultures place different emphasis on education. So we have to understand how education influences a society. What do we get taught in school? What we get taught in school in Japan may be very different to what we get taught in school in Australia versus Italy versus US, Thailand, and so on. The concept of hospitality and gift giving is also very, very different, right? So we have to be mindful of that, and we also have to be aware of the borderline difference between gift giving as a sign of, kind of being respectful, friendly versus bribery. Okay, as international managers, you have to be aware of all this. Dimensions of cultural values. Now, this is where we need to think a bit more. Hofstede's cultural values. I want you to do this as homework. Next week, I'm going to ask you about Hofstede because we expect that you understand Hofstede in your study of culture. What is power distance? What is individualism versus collectivism? What do we mean by uncertainty avoidance? What do we mean by a society is more masculine or more feminine? Okay? Next week I'll ask you about this. Right. Hofstede talked about cultural values. This is his fifth dimension, Confucian dynamism. So I want you to read up on Hofstede. There's a website you can read up. You can read your textbook, and I'm going to ask you questions around Hofstede's cultural dimensions and Hofstede's cultural dimensions scores for 21 selected countries. So for example, when Australia is being compared to, say, Korea, how are the values different? For example, the cultural dimensions of power distance of Australia is 36 versus, say, Korea 60. Individualism, Korea 18, Australia 90. Like what the gentleman said, we are more individualists in orientation. Okay, so I want you to look up Hofstede and understand it. Rowan Shanker talk about grouping countries into various clusters is another way to look at how we compare different cultures. Now, if you're interested, you can read up a bit more about Rowan Shanker as well, and we can talk about it again next week. Cultural distance is something that we talk about the degree to which countries differ as a whole, okay? So companies enter into different countries doing business, need to look at the cultural distance. Now, Norton Ching in 1988 measured the cultural distance as opposed to psychic distance. Now, can you tell me the difference between cultural distance versus psychic distance? If you can't, then you should look it up. The new concept, define it, explain it, and then you can apply it to analyze something. Okay, implications for international business is important. Societies differ because the cultures differ. So if we don't understand different cultures, influence the way we do things, the way we do business, then we're going to run into problems. So managers need to develop cross-cultural literacy. They need to understand culture can have a make or break kind of advantage. It can also provide you with some sort of advantage in business. There's the connection between culture and ethics in decision making. Now again, because we have the guest speaker, which took much, much longer. It was meant to be a very short talk. We don't get to finish the slides. So I want you to finish going through the rest of the slides. The last few slides are meant to be just fun, okay? Meant to just give you that comparison. What's the difference between Japanese culture, Indian culture, Chinese culture, all right? That's not all the cultures, but just to provide you with a bit of example. Now, most important for you to form your groups, finalize your groups by the end of this week, start working on the 500 words proposal. If you've got any questions, post on Cloud Deacon and the professor will respond as soon as he can. Okay, good luck and I will see you next week, week 3. Oh, that's a good idea.